to another edition of Beyond the Game, presented by TV Sports. I'm your host, Steve Hayes, and today my guest is the Vice President of Sports Illustrated, Ian Ritchie. Ian, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on as usual, Steven. You're a good man. Thanks for
No,
having me.
I appreciate you. I truly appreciate you. I know your past, how you kind of got started, but I wanted you to talk about it a little bit more. Obviously, you started with Fantasy Toolbox, and you're still going with it.
Yep.
But before the role of Vice President of Sports Illustrated came about, where did it start for you?
It started from a place from the heart, just a passion to be involved in the fantasy industry and to really, embrace community of fantasy and friendships I'd made through the fantasy industry. And we just did it because it was a lot of fun. It was something we woke up every day and really wanted to do and wanted to be part of. And when we launched, after FF Toolbox became the popular site that it was, we really started focusing on building community, and giving people a place where they could go and share stories and talk about their bad beats and their successes, and tap into a real network of people that are the top players in the world to help other folks with their teams so they can feel successful and win. And the recipe for us was if we are good and we can help people win, then they're always going to come back. They'll always be back. And so, the last thing in the world you can do to people is give them bad info and they don't want to come back, So it's been a long road for us with FF Toolbox, with the Fantasy Football World Championships and other things. And it's just, like I said, it just started from a place in the heart of really a passion for all of us.
Now, for you, obviously, you've been in this game a long time. So for you, fantasy football for you started in the late 80s, correct?
Yeah, playing with my dad.
Playing with your dad before the computers and everything.
Yeah.
Take me through that. What was that like? How fun was it? How difficult was it? Did you find it challenging?
It was great. I mean, I think that at the time playing with my dad, it was a lot of fun because it was a father-son thing. And a lot of times when you're that age, 16, 17, you don't always have the easiest time communicating with your parents or having things in common, with your parents. And so fantasy football was one of those things that draw us together. You study for the draft together, you draft your team together, and you're communicating the whole time. You talk about your lineups, you talk about waiver wire, you watch the games together. It becomes a bonding experience, and that showed me early on the magic of it. And so when I went on to college and I was in my fraternity and we started a league in the fraternity, same thing. All the guys that were in the league, man, we all bonded. We're talking all the time. You're watching games together, and you just feel that sense of community that builds. And it really always gave me a sense of people I wanted to be around, people I want to talk to, and a real bonding experience, whether it was my dad or in the fraternity or friends of mine that were outside the fraternity.
Now, obviously, you see what fantasy football is today.
Yeah.
And it's great that you were able to build that bond with your father and then go on, like you said, with your friends in college. But I've spoken with you about this, and you feel it's watered down today. When it's on the outside looking in, it's clearly one of the biggest things going.
Yeah.
But for you, being a part of it for so long and helping put it where it is today without people really understanding and knowing, you feel it's more watered down, right?
I do. I mean, the internet's gotten bigger. The megaphones through social media have gotten a lot bigger, and everybody's become an expert. I listened to, it used to just be kind of us and our friends. It was kind of our little niche thing that we did, and it was a lot of fun. And at a certain extent, the bigger it's gotten, for me personally, the less fun it's become, right? There's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of bad experts. We always say all experts aren't created equal. You watch them on TV, you're bombarded with people who just graduated from journalism school who are now fantasy experts, and they're right in your face. And it kind of takes away the fun of the industry that everybody built, right? Once it becomes a lot more corporate, it really does water it down. It waters the information down, the expertise down, and it makes everybody feel like, well, if Field Yates can do it, then I can do it. If Matthew Berry can do it, I can do it. And everybody thinks they're their own expert, which, to me is a little bit dicey. We've always tried to brand ourselves as the best players in the world, the top analysts in the world in that way, because they win. And, everybody out there should listen to people that win and win consistently, as opposed to people that never win. But at this point, because it's so watered down, it's hard to decipher between those experts, and it's a lot of noise. That's what I call it, a lot of noise out there. So cutting through the noise isn't always the easiest thing to do.
And for you, ESPN has something now, I believe it's called Ask Watson. But you guys came up with something before that, right?
We did.
What was the name of that?
Ask Max. And what it was it was called our Maximizer, right? And today those are called optimizers, right? Where they optimize lineups and they tell you who to put in and who not to play and that. And we launched a thing way back when called Ask Max. And it was instead of an optimizer, it was the Maximizer. Maximize your team, maximize your lineup, and you could plug players in, and it would fill in other players for you as suggestions for whether it was waiver wire or even for daily fantasy. It was a really fun tool, and it was a lot of fun to play around on. And now there's a lot of them out there. They're a little bit different than the one we created, but it's the same theory, right? And one thing we always said is, and one thing the Maximizer was great was because at the end of the day, you're only as good as the information you put in on the front end, right? Because if the projections and rankings on the front end are good, then it will actually maximize your lineup in the end. If your projections and rankings on the front end are bad, then your optimizing and your maximizing your lineup are going to be bad. And so it's all related to the same stuff. Everybody's got their tools, but garbage in, garbage out, right? So that's why, you put the best foot forward and you put your best rankings and projections in. It really helps people win on the back end who use your tools. And that's kind of what we found is the most important part.
And that's great, because I've took your method and your logic without ever knowing in the past when I started fantasy, because I learned my lessons, no disrespect to anybody, but I learned my lessons from listening to Matthew Berry. And so I learned my lessons on that end. So
that's
when
right.
you see guys like Josh Allen and you say, well, no, don't draft Josh Allen because I drafted Josh Allen this year because I knew he would be a stud.
That's right.
Josh Allen is huge for the Buffalo Bills, and he continues to prove to be huge for the Buffalo Bills. So I look at it in the regard, I feel like if you're going to play it, you should play it from the standpoint of having fun with it.
That's right.
Because if you're just looking at it from the standpoint of what Matthew Berry is saying do or what Phil Yates is saying do, then you really don't know what you're doing.
No, you don't.
You're only going off of what they're saying.
Hey, you're a sheep. We always had a joke. Every league of 12, there's 11 losers. And those 11 losers are all watching the same people. And, our rankings and projections on our site are just different every single week. And people, oh my gosh, your rankings are so weird and so different. Well, that's why we're the one winner, right? And if you want to be a sheep and you want to follow all the masses, then you're going to lose. That's just fact. Because, look, Matthew Berry's a great guy. He's been a friend for a while. He's a funny guy. He wrote Crocodile Dundee 3, which is a fact
really?
Most people. Yeah. He's a comedy writer, and that's why he's able to take kind of what you say is a dry, dry stuff, fantasy stuff, and make it funny and make it entertaining to read. And it's why he's been able to make a name for himself. And to be honest, he was one of the real trailblazers in the industry when he was the talented Mr. Roto. He sold his company to ESPN, but he was told no from ESPN a couple of times before they finally bought his business and brought him on. And he was originally one of the trailblazers in the industry that left, good jobs in Hollywood writing scripts to follow his passion of fantasy. And most people don't understand or know that about him, but I respect him for that stuff. It doesn't mean he's a great player, but he's able to take something that's very dry and make it really, really funny.
And I think the other thing about it is most people don't know if you are or are not a great player.
Right.
Obviously, you're not going to pull up your fantasy stats and show what you do every year. But
yeah,
do you know anybody, Ian, that still plays fantasy from how you guys played back in the late 80s?
Yes. There's actually, yeah, man. There's a league in Las Vegas that a bunch of guys have been in, and they still do everything by hand. They refuse to use online commissioner products. They do everything by hand. Oh yeah, man. They every week after the Monday night game, they send the guy used to send a fax, if you can believe it, to everybody. I think he now sends emails with his hand scoring. They double check it all. They have really antiquated scoring rules that we used to have way back when, 50 yards to 74 yards is 2 points. 75 to
Wow.
99 yards is 4 points, right? 100 to 124 is 6 points, right? It's this very antiquated scoring, and they still do it. A lot of people are creatures of habit that way. And so I find that people that are older, they stick with what they know, right? And they have these old school rules, and they just stay with it. And so there's a specific league in Vegas that I know that still does it all by hand. And that, man, every year I just laugh. I think it's the funniest thing, but I'm so happy they still do it because it's what they enjoy doing. They like to figure out the scoring by hand. They don't want it figured out for them. Part of the fun.
And that's actually amazing, because I know my generation would have a breakdown if that was that route that, that you had to take to do fantasy.
That's right.
I'm just going to be honest. Like, that would be a nerve-wracking situation. Obviously, if it was introduced to you in the beginning, then you would be familiar with it and you'd be fine. But that is amazing to be able to still do that in this day and age, knowing all the technology that you have on hand. And that is a true fantasy.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, and they really enjoy it. They take pride in the fact that they still do it that way, you know, as opposed to everybody doing it for them and it all being automated scoring and everything. They take a lot of pride in it. It's pretty cool.
Now, before I get to your role as the VP of Sports Illustrated, obviously you're a very passionate entrepreneur, very successful entrepreneur. But what made you want to take that jump to VP of Sports Illustrated? Because I know you don't really care for the corporate world and such. So what made you want to take that jump?
Not really about me, it's about our team, right? You know, I got a lot of guys in the team and folks in the team that, you know, have been working their tails off for years, trying to make a name for themselves, whether they're writers, editors, and whatever. And so, you know, landing on what I told them is landing on the mothership, right? For all of them was really the big push. I mean, I appreciate all the hard work they've all put in for so long, and they deserve it, right? They deserve to get that credibility. They deserve to have a full-time job in the industry. They deserve to have benefits in the industry. They deserve every part of that. And so for me, you know, sometimes you look beyond yourself and what's best for your team. And what's best for my team was to, you know, land them somewhere where they feel like they have that stability and a chance to grow and a platform to grow the brand that we've built and work so hard every day. So, you know, what's good for me isn't always best for the team. And so it was really important for us to do this for their sake. And once we did, you know, they're all in great spot now. They get respect. They have the platform that they deserve. They have stability in a job, and a full-time job. And in fantasy, that's difficult to achieve. And so that was really the big point for us.
And that's a big step. I commend you for that, for being the leader and recognizing, hey, set myself to the side, and that's what a leader does, and makes everything for the team. Now, on the entrepreneur side, for you personally, you've never lost that passion. What keeps you motivated every day? What keeps you going? You've been in this game for so long. What keeps you going?
Just, you know, people, the energy other people have, you know, the passion other people have. I mean, you're an up and coming guy. Other folks that are up and coming folks that have a passion for the industry and for sports media and stuff. It makes me excited, and I get that sense of energy and excitement from other people. And it drives me still and keeps me going because, you know, I'm long past the part where it's about me. And I really like to interact with folks in the industry and people that are where I was and our team was, you know, a while back. And, you know, everybody in that position still has that energy and that real passion for it. And the more people I talk to that are that way, it gives me, you know, I feel reborn a lot of times. You know, it kind of keeps me going. And, you know, I've always been a builder, and being a builder, oh, there's my guy Kurt behind me doing the fitness lights. But being a builder, you know, you build things and you figure out what your strengths are, and you figure out what other people's strengths are, and you put your team together. And a lot of days when you're not motivated, you bank on your teammates to be motivated and get you rolling, because nobody's motivated 7 days a week. It's a really difficult thing. And, you know, some mornings I wake up and I'm like, oh man, geez, you know, but I got my teammates and they get me fired up and they get me rolling. They give me that energy that I need to continue pushing along on those other days. So it's kind of a magic thing when you get the right group together and you just continue with that passion every morning.
And I actually wanted to touch on that a little bit more. You said when you get that right group and you said you have the team, how did you know, or as an entrepreneur, if you're building something that involves the team, obviously, how do you
Mhm.
know when it's the right team?
That's a good question. Not everybody has the same work habits, and a lot of it, you kind of go into something and you try people out, and if they fit really well with everybody else, and we have the same entrepreneur spirit, the same, hey, look, if I get an important email at 9:45 at night, I'm on it. Some people aren't wired that way. Some people are wired that, oh, hey, I got off work at 5, I'll answer that in the morning. And so for us, that's not a great fit for our team. It's a great fit for other teams potentially, but for our team, it's not. And so a lot of it's a trying out process to see and understand how people fit in, and then just communicating with everybody that's been with us for a long time and asking their opinions, letting them be part of the process of hiring people and interviewing people. Because if it works for all of us, it works great. If it works for 75% of us, it won't work because we all work together, you know?
And I feel like I've become, it's funny that you say that because I have literally the past couple of weeks been up till 2:30 in the morning, sending emails,
Yeah. Yeah.
getting stuff done.
Yep.
If my wife is away, she'll look and say, well, why don't you go?
Yeah.
Like it's on my mind. I
Yeah.
have to get it out. It's on my mind. And
That's right.
you just keep going because it's not the same situation as a 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm. That's
It's
right.
not a structured platform.
Yep.
It's a different day to day. You can have a plan of what you're going to do for the next day, and
Yeah.
but obviously you have to go. That's taking nothing away from anybody that has a 9 to 5, but obviously your mindset is a little different when you step into this entrepreneur side.
That's right.
Uh, what do you feel like for you? I guess I can say. I guess I want to say, how did you know you weren't built? You were built for the entrepreneurship role, as opposed for the corporate role.
Um, Man, that's a really really great question, and I think a lot of people don't really know until they try it, and it's like you can be in corporate and think that corporate role is great for you, right? Um, Once you try out being an entrepreneur, you're either in or you're out, right? Like you said, you're up at 2:30 in the morning because something's on your mind. If if you don't have that mentality, then you're in the wrong space. You're in the wrong spot, and you should maybe look for a corporate job. When your mentality is that way, then it just lives inside of you in that way, and if you're in a corporate life and you're sending emails at 2:30 in the morning, they think you're nuts. They literally think you're crazy.
Really?
Uh, it's just not that way, which takes nothing away from that. It's just it's just a completely different mindset on a daily basis. An entrepreneur, you have a lot more ownership in what you do and what you build. And, you don't, when you're in a corporate mentality, you don't always necessarily feel that ownership in the whole group. You might feel ownership in what your job is, but you don't really feel ownership in everything, in every aspect. And so that's why it's sometimes difficult for me in a corporate situation because, every day we're always responsible for everything, the marketing, sales, sponsorship, customer service. And in corporate, you got to stay in your lane. Somebody's in charge of customer service. Somebody's in charge of marketing. Somebody's in charge of selling the memberships and sponsorship. And if you get out of your lane, you're stepping on their toes because that's their job. And you don't want to offend people. You don't want to act like you know better. It's just what you're used to doing, and so it's just a completely different mindset. And it's funny because there's been times where I'm like, man, I don't feel like I'm working very hard, right? Because I'm not in charge of those things, or I'm not responsible for those things, and I'm not creating plans around those things. Somebody else is. Um, and it's just a weird feeling to say, oh, I'm gonna sit back and let you come up with the plan, and then I'll just be responsible for my lane and come up with content, and I'll put your plan in place, as opposed to helping develop the plan or discussing the plan or anything like that. So it's a big difference.
And that is definitely something that I'm learning as we go. You have to in this space you can say, okay, well, I'm gonna do it, and I get what you mean now. And in the corporate world, I can understand how you will be stepping on somebody's toes.
Yeah.
Because everybody's designed to say, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours. But
Yeah.
for you, obviously you found the right team. You guys been successful for years. And I'm learning from you every time. I studied you, I learned from you, so I truly appreciate you. If there's any words of encouragement that you could leave for the youth or anybody, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
doctor, a lawyer, aspiring to be anything successful in the future, what would you be able to say to them?
First I'd say is I've failed 100 times. I've been told no 500 times. I've had doors slammed in my face. Get out of here. We have no interest in what you're doing. More times than you could ever imagine, right? And sometimes it shakes your confidence a little bit, right? And you question what you're doing and things like that. But when it's in your heart, you plow forward, and you don't listen to no. You don't hear no. You just know that you're going to find the right person, and they were the wrong person. It's not you, it's them. And that to me was a big start because, look, in the late 90s and early 2000s, we're out there pitching the fantasy football world championships to people, and they're looking at us like, you guys are crazy. NFL Network had just launched in 2002, and we thought, hey, we have a lot of amazing content for you that could fill up your airways. I mean, here's the fantasy football world championship. It's the equivalent of the World Series of Poker. Here's all these personalities, all these great people. There's rankings, there's all these great things, and they couldn't tell us no fast enough. It's fascinating where it's come, and I think to myself, with 3 minutes left in a football game and a blowout, the only people still watching are the fantasy guys and the gambling folks, right? And so we're keeping your advertisers and your sponsors happy. Like, you should be embracing us. And it took a lot of those brands a long time to recognize the loyalty. They hated fantasy because it wasn't a true fan. And now, instead of being a true fan of one team, you're a fan of almost all teams. You buy jerseys of multiple players. So I would just say that, man, just be prepared for lots and lots of no's and lots of people who don't know any better. Just because they say no and they're in a position of power for you today doesn't mean they know any better than you do. They don't. Period. End of story. And when you know something in your heart and it's a passion and you're emotional about it, you just need to keep plugging along. And the last thing I would say about that is the staying power, right? If I would have stopped, if our team would have stopped every time we heard no, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't have existed for the last 15 years. But keeping at it every day, keep pounding away, keep pounding the nails, you know what I mean? And just keep working at it. And that's why we've been successful, I think. You will ultimately find the right people to surround yourself with, that help your brand get where you want to be. But it's not easy, and it's not going to be quick. When you commit to doing this, or to doing your own business, or to doing something in your life, it is a long-term commitment. It is not a short-term deal. It's not going to be, oh, hey, I'll do this for 2 or 3 years. You better plan on 10 years, and you better plan around being around for 10 years and busting your ass every single day.
I truly appreciate those words of encouragement, and the fact that you said, you guys were knocking at those doors in the beginning, and to see where fantasy has evolved to now.
Right.
Do you feel like, obviously they said no and everything, but do you feel like at that time it would have been as big as it is now?
I always knew. I mean, I just because I always knew how communities rallied and how people were so passionate about it. I always knew that it would end up, as popular as it is now. And I just couldn't understand why other people didn't see it. I mean, everybody's stuck in their own world, and everybody does what they do in corporate life, right? They don't think outside the box. Most of the time when you go to somebody as a corporate partner, most of the time what they hear, no matter what you're saying, is more work for me, right? And nobody wants to hear that in the corporate world. And so that's why, they may like your idea but still turn you down, because to them, more work for me, right? And so understanding people's where their head is, right, is really important part of that process, because we started going to people saying, hey, we're turnkey, no more work for you, right? We have a brand, we have the experts, we have the tools, we're turnkey, no work for you, plug us in, right? And that was a really important lesson I learned from the MGM. Actually, in Las Vegas, we had a deal cut with MGM before all this craziness. What we thought back in, God, it must have been 2014 or 15, and we were looking to partner with MGM back then and be their partner for daily fantasy and run that for them, and run season-long fantasy and run contests to drive people into casinos and weekly stuff, and their risk department said, no thanks. And it was because fantasy was an unregulated business, whereas gaming is a very regulated business. And so at that time, I knew until fantasy became a regulated business, even though I am not a huge fan of government regulation, until it became a regulated business, it wasn't going to reach the potential that it should have had, and now has, because it is a regulated business and daily fantasy is regulated in all the states. So, now that they have that regulation, a lot of corporations, a lot of big players are more than willing to kind of jump in when they weren't really necessarily going to when it was an unregulated business. And so that was a big learning lesson for me that I learned from some executives at MGM. I came out of there like, oh wow, we gotta kind of figure this out now. It's like these corporate partners aren't going to come running to us until it becomes regulated, and that was a big lesson. So it's a give and take with that.
Now, obviously, you're vice president of Sports Illustrated, and I know you said you did it for the team. Is there anything now that you see that you look back on and you felt like you're glad you did it this way, or you should have did it this way? How does it work for you now, being, because you're really on both sides. You're still in the entrepreneur world and you're in the corporate world.
Right,
so
right.
How do you look at it?
I think one of the things I look back at and that we didn't do was build an app. It was a terrible mistake. We just didn't do it. We didn't have the bandwidth to do it. We didn't have the back then we didn't have the financing and budget to do that kind of stuff, and we had to prioritize. So I think one of the biggest mistakes we made was not building an app, because as the world went more toward apps on their phones, we weren't there, right? We were absent, and I think that's probably strategically the biggest mistake in the last handful of years that we made that other folks didn't make. And that certainly hurt us. But, at the same time, it allowed us to spend our time building the world championships and our live event business and the brands and stuff. But, I mean, that's probably the biggest mistake we made. I would say that other mistakes we've made along the way pale in comparison to that. But, like, even when you execute a good business, you're not going to be right all the time. You're going to make bad decisions. And the world's going to change in a year. I mean, we thought the biggest mistake we made was not building our own commissioner product. Software, right? As it turns out, wasn't a mistake at all. It's actually better to not build it and have to keep it up and just always work with who's good. And it gives you flexibility to move commissioner products and software and stuff like that. And so something we thought was a terrible mistake ended up being a blessing that we didn't do it.
and that's great for you. Like I said, I truly learn from you. And if I have a question, I know I can shoot you an email.
Absolutely.
And because you're definitely helpful in every way. So
I appreciate that, man.
And lastly, before you get out of here, man, I have to know, are you still wearing your Packers jersey every Sunday? Every
Sunday, sleeping a Saturday night. Sleeping a Saturday night, man. I wake up with my Favre jersey on. I'm ready to roll. Still my Brett Favre. You can barely see the numbers. It's pretty bad. Everyone makes fun of me. So
do you have a Super Bowl prediction this year?
It's funny you brought up Josh Allen. I've been saying that my surprise team since early in the season was the Buffalo Bills, and I think a lot of people doubted that. I thought bringing in Stephon Diggs was just an enormous move for them. Huge. It really opens up the offense. Josh Allen's maturation this year has been incredible. So they're my surprise team that I've kind of been on all year, and I'm not going to back away from that. So look, are there other teams that will probably have a better chance to win it all? Yes. But the team I'm actually rooting for, other than my Seahawks, is Buffalo Bills. I think that it would just be a magical year for them. Buffalo's a great football town. And I think a lot of people doubted Josh Allen. And, Carson Wentz was all the talk. It's just amazing what another year makes, and here's this guy who people doubted and he could potentially lead his team to the title. So I'm outside of my Seahawks. I'm really rooting for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills this year.
And I have a buddy who can attest to this because I told him. I said it would be Packers and Bills in the Super Bowl.
Man, there you go. You got my guys. Other than my Hawks, those are the teams I root for. There you go.
Packers I'm a big fan of the Packers, so that was the fan in me. But on the opposite side, I said Packers and Bills. So
that's good, man. You saw it.
I hope so. I hope this is what we get. So I appreciate you, Ian, for coming on the show, man. Hope we can have you back again.
Anytime.
I truly appreciate it. This is Steve, Ian Ritchie, Beyond the Game. Appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks for having me on, man. Anytime.